Welcome, friends, from the United Lodge of Theosophists, Washington, D.C. Today's talk is on the Guardian Wall. Next Sunday, we will celebrate White Lotus Day in honor of the life and work of H.P. Blavatsky. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists and the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The following is a form signed by associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists. Being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine. And now for today's talk.
Thank you. Today's reading comes from the Voice of the Silence. To live to benefit mankind is the first step. To practice the 6 glorious virtues is the second. To don Nirmanakaya's humble robe is to forego eternal bliss for self, to help on men's salvation, to reach nirvana's bliss, but to renounce it is the supreme, the final step, the highest on renunciation's path. Know, O disciple, this is a secret path, selected by the Buddhas of perfection, who sacrificed the self to weaker selves. Yet if the doctrine of the heart is too high-winged for thee, if thou needest help thyself, and fearest to offer help to others, then thou, O timid heart, be warned in time. Remain content with the eye doctrine of the law. Hope still, for if the secret path is unattainable this day, it is within thy reach tomorrow. Learn that no effects, not the smallest, whether in right or wrong direction, can vanish from the world of causes. Even wasted smoke remains not traceless. A harsh word uttered in past life is not destroyed, but ever comes again. The pepper plant will not give birth to roses, nor the sweet jasmine silver star to thorn or thistle turn. Thou canst create this day thy chances for thy morrow. In the great journey, causes sown each hour bear each its harvest of effects, for rigid justice rules the world. With mighty sweep of never-erring action, it brings to mortals lives of weal or woe, the karmic progeny of all our former thoughts and deeds. Take then as much as merit hath in store for thee, O thou O patient heart. Be of good cheer, and rest content with fate. Such is thy karma, the karma of the cycle of thy birth, the destiny of those who in their pain and sorrow are born along with thee. Rejoice and weep from life to life, chained to thy previous actions. Today's talk is on the guardian wall. What is it? How did it come about? What exactly does it do? And what it is guarding us from? Man, as we know, is a seventh principled being, and only the first, the physical, the body, is on this plane. We live on the physical plane, but we have invisible aspects to our nature also. For the last 3 weeks, we defined principles of the higher mind, the psychic principle, the astral body, and showed the difference between those concepts. The consciousness, the activity of each have to differentiate between them. So that is very important to understand for today's talk. Because as we humans live on the physical plane, we also conduct ourselves on this plane. And when we look around, either in the Western world or in the Eastern world, we see activities that are going on that is not very favorable or in the benefit of humanity itself. Man, who is a thinking individual, is not acting with his divine aspect of himself, but in most cases our activities are conducted from the lower aspect of us, the intellectual mind, selfishness, materiality, and accumulation of wealth. It seems to be still very prominent in our culture today. So basically it is a competitive culture where people are mostly concerned with their own welfare. Humanity has become self-conscious. We're thinking beings. And when we look around us to other kingdoms, we notice that this unkindness, this meanness, this disconcern for one another does not really exist. The kingdoms below us all take from nature what they need, but never more than what they need. And they don't show unkindness to one another. And they're not thinking beings. We are. They simply work with instinct and rudimentary intelligence, most of the animal kingdom even. And elementals are not kind to us because we are imprinting all these undesirable thoughts, unkindness, and meanness onto them. And the higher kingdoms are all without personalities. So they have that compassionate caring for all of humanity. They don't look at us as individuals, but as one unit. Because as we said, the self, the oversoul is one, and we have our life in it. We need to express that self that gives us the divinity in us and show all of the positive aspects of divinity to one another. So when we ask ourselves, what is the guardian wall and why is it there? It kind of gives us a clue, because in the archaic ages and in the beginning even of cycles previous to this one, we see that divine dynasties were ruling human beings at that time to show them how to conduct themselves, how to behave towards one another, how to compose a family life and raise children according to beneficent rules that will impart to them the correct knowledge, so that in the future ages they would also become leaders benefiting humanity. And Krishna says that this took place because man was not able to conduct himself in such a way to be able to put in charge of other men. So we are really unkind to one another. Sometimes even cruelty occurs. So men to men, when we look around it, we do not show that brotherhood, that unity, that compassionate nature, which is our higher aspect, that needs to be expressed in this age today. So in order to protect humanity from worse evils, it is said, this guardian wall was conducted and put in place to protect humanity from worse evils. Well, who put it there and how does it protect us? Well, is it a real wall? Obviously not. It's a spiritual wall, obviously, and it protects us invisibly. It's there, and invisibly it protects humanity. As to those who put it there, we will talk about them as we go along. So the life of a human being really is not on this plane. The real inner entity lives in higher planes of consciousness, and in sleep it is freed to go to those spheres where it conducts itself in the presence of higher intelligences and learns from them. But on the physical plane, obviously most of us are not aware as to what goes on in sleep. So during sleep, the inner ego lives its own life without being hampered by the physical brain and its activities. It is the responsibility of the 21st century to bring this to the forefront. In other words, to enable humanity to express itself in its divine life and moral living is necessary for the 21st century. How does this come about? What exactly do we do in order to bring this change into our societal norm? Well, it says in the voice of the silence, our first responsibility is the care of humanity, not our personal little selves. So those who conduct themselves in this manner, the ones that have freed themselves of matter and the restrictions of it that it puts on us, as well as the emancipation of the mind from matter, can actually live a spiritual life and show all other human beings on earth how to do the same. This comes about from sacrifice. We're here to take care of one another, to sacrifice for one another in order to enable this conduct to become norm amongst ourselves. Without sacrifice, it will not come about. When we think about it, deity, its first impulse is that sacrifice. Kamadeva is the god of love. So the center of our whole universe is based on love, kindness, and concern for all. Until we also can express the same, this change will not come about. So how do we do this service? How do we change our environment, our society? How do we alter our world to express the divinity, the kindness, the love? We certainly cannot change others. The theosophical tenets were brought out in the 19th century to show us the way. And the most axiomatic statement is, man, know thyself. So we cannot know others, but we can certainly know ourselves. And with that statement, our responsibility starts, our duty carries it forward, and at the culmination of it, we have learned who we truly are. So how do we do this? How do we change ourselves? We know that to alter our character, to change one undesirable trait in ourselves is the most difficult task we can undertake. So each one of us then has to undertake this work and bring about the change which is from inside out. Only then can we truly come to know ourselves through this effort continuously until the change comes about. The first important aspect of this service to humanity then is to become impersonal, so that the service provided is impersonal service. But what is impersonal service? Because we, humanity at this time, works from personality most of the time. We must not fall into the folly to think that we have already overcome our personality and that we are higher evolved beings trying to work on this plane, because that in itself is anthropomorphism and materialism. So we must not come under the dominance of words. We need to understand the inner meaning of these words before we can apply them to life in general. So brotherhood, as it manifests in nature, is real because it recognizes the interrelationship of every unit to the other. Whereas we as human beings are apt to probably classify all those around us into three groups. The first we would think are those who are superior to us, superior in rank, station, social, mental ability, and so we would think that would be the first one. The second would be those who are equal to ourselves in all these respects, and the third would be whom we would call inferior to ourselves. But this is not a real way of looking at those who are all around us. A better way would be to look at people not superior, equal, or inferior, but rather that all of us have abilities that are highly developed and some other abilities that are dormant and some abilities that are partially developed. So when we look around, we recognize that we can learn from everyone, and they in return can learn from all those they come into contact with. So the messenger of this wisdom that we talk about in Theosophical Circle is everywhere around us, because all human beings can be teachers and learners. So if we pay attention to what it is that being said and assimilate it, we can learn from everybody. And then we come to the statement, how about those who seek out him who knows less than thou? Well, what does that really mean, to seek someone who knows less than us? Doesn't that also mean that that is also seeking that that one or him or her who's going to give birth in the hall of wisdom that we are seeking? If masters are servants of humanity, so the service of those they serve becomes our intention also, and we're actually going out and doing it, so aren't we earning their blessing? Obviously we are. Well, we, I think, can call these kind of virtues on earth. We're not talking about the transcendental virtues, but virtues that actually have an expression in our conduct, in our daily life. So the first one we said is impersonal service. The second aspect of that sacrificial service that we're going to do is to give our very best to whatever situation we come to face, because all our circumstances are different, but the service needs to come from that core inside of us, and we give our very best effort to it. We see that people all around us are suffering. We see that they're trying to overcome that suffering. And we tell ourselves, okay, how are we going to remove this suffering? And immediately, as soon as we understand that, we start studying Theosophy, because we want to learn as much as we can, assimilate it, so that it can give us guidance in removing obstacles when we come face to face with these situations. We need to give this service to others this help to others with kindness, with pointedness, with generosity, not partially, that we do all that we can, we give all that we can at that moment, so that it is not partial, but it is wholeheartedly done. So this study then enables us to absorb what we need to from the philosophy before we enter at the same time the path of service. So this service is given wholeheartedly when the heart becomes intelligent and the mind becomes compassionate. That's when we do this service wholeheartedly. One or the other will not do the work. So head, heart, and hands have to work in unison. So the third aspect of this sacrificial giving then would be the discernment aspect of it. How do we find out what kind of service needs to be provided? And remember, the first aspect is impersonality. The second aspect is to serve it with everything we have wholeheartedly. And the third aspect is to discern what exactly they need, what would be the best way to actually extend this help. So discrimination and dispassion are acquired as we make this effort. Another person's duty is full of danger, we are told. So it behooves us to learn to do our own duty, our own work. And in order to understand that, this discrimination has to come about, as well as dispassion. We have to look at it impartially. We have to look at it from the heart, and we have to look at it with discrimination. So we come to that critical stage where we say to ourselves, in this case, what particular aspect of this philosophy applies to this situation? And we flawlessly examine it in the light of the ideals that we have been introduced to, not the implication of it, but rather its understanding on the higher planes of being. Because this then leads us to a higher criticism, which is really no criticism at all, but when we bring ideas to this plane, it also enables us to interject the solution into the suggestion or how we are going to serve. Thus, impersonally giving our very best with discriminative dispassion, we see that the self is in all, because our inner life is that of the self, and all the selves are united. We come from the same core of light. We are that. Every one of us then constitute in totality that. So neither study, devotion, or philanthropy on their own can achieve this task, but that we have to have the three of it merged in our philanthropy in order to be useful in this help that we are providing. And we know that the masters just do that. They have perfected their aspects. They no longer allow the constitution or its for lower aspects of the individuality to interfere in their thinking or in their compassionate philanthropy they extend towards all. So this self then is an inner path that we take to reach, and each one of us must make this journey on our own. We provide all the help we can to one another and encourage one another, but the path has to be treaded by each one, because that path becomes ourselves. Without becoming that path, we cannot walk it. In order to travel on it, we must become the path itself. So, many people say in our environment, I need to evolve, I need to become better able to do this work. But that is really no excuse for it, because it shows that our desire is to develop ourselves. But isn't that really based on selfishness, that we want to develop further before we can actually go out and do the service? Whereas what we are told is to serve humanity is the first step, as we just read in the Voice of the Silence. And we have developed our natures to some degree, and we have to start at this moment where we are in order to provide that service. It is not gaining knowledge. This service is not dependent on gaining knowledge. It is not dependent on gaining knowledge to do the service in the future. It is dependent on doing the service today, now, because we have developed to some degree, we have gained knowledge to some degree, we have discrimination to some degree. So if we start that process now, this service that provide is actually what enables us to obtain knowledge. The higher knowledge is the knowledge of our spiritual self. The spirit in us is the same spirit. It is inside as well as outside. It's everywhere. Not one speck of space can be without it. It is omniscient. It is omnipresent. It is eternal. It is impartite. So knowing all this, we know that all of us are the same in a spiritual essence. So the same metaphysical truth is also conveyed in the statement that the master soul is within us. And this master soul is the universal soul. There's only one universal soul. It says, live in that master as its ray in thee. Live in thy fellows as they live in it. So there's no difference amongst us in our spiritual essence. And as each one of us, considering each one of us, live in that light, in that oversoul. So when we convince ourselves that the study and the service is two aspects of the same thing, then we undertake it on behalf of that self, now, today. So by serving that self in our fellow men, then this wisdom comes to us slowly. It opens up. It's inside, But as we give the service, as we devote ourselves to this sacrificial service with its three aspects, that wisdom then enables us to do wider and better work as it opens itself to us. So if the people around us continuously complain that they're not able to provide any service, then they have to look inside of themselves as to why this is, because it's not theosophical teachings that is in our way, but obviously something else. Who are the beings who compose the guardian wall? Because it is stated that it is their blood that cements it, that is the protective wall around us, preventing worse evils coming to humanity itself. So these great ones are the stones in that wall, it is stated. This constitutes the deathless race of the divines. And they live in that power of bliss and higher contentment because they are perfected beings. And they don't have any bondage, personal limitations, because they're emancipated from that crushing power of material existence. And they're rich in their possessions because of their compassionate will, making those possessions available to all. And they serve from the chant of their inner temple, which is their bodies, of course. So this constitutes that wall, this great brotherhood that actually protects humanity from itself more than anything else, because we treat one another not from this higher aspect. And we have explained that we need to overcome our kamic nature, in other words, the animal man in us, and allow this higher light to express itself, because mute and silent, it dies if we don't allow it to express itself. So, we see that the guardian wall is the protective wall erected around humanity by those divine beings, and one of their number intermittently come amongst us in different ages, different geographical areas, different nations, different languages, but the philosophy they give is the same. When we look at the world, we see that they represent the self amongst us, showing us how to reach that higher expression of ourselves. When we look at all around the world, we see Buddha, Sankaracharya, Jesus for the West. We see other representatives such as Ammonius Saccas, who gave this philosophy out again. We see Pythagoras, Socrates, Paracelsus, all of them giving the same. We see others in Arabia. When the light got extinguished from Europe, it is stated that it went to that area in the Middle East. Geber is one of the best ones known, and if you study astrology, you can see that some of the names given are in Arabic. So it is not the possession of one particular nation, but this wisdom religion or wisdom of the ages is the possession of all humanity, because eventually, in the end, we're going to unite and become one again. Thank you.